thank you very much for coming. My name is John Jogan. I'm Deputy Vice Chancellor here at the University of East London. If you haven't been here before, in particular, warm welcome. And it's nice that we're hosting this in the SportsDock building. And of course, many of our links to Brazil, present and future, we hope will be based around sport as well as business, as well as many other things. Our links in Brazil are developing all the time. I'm delighted and honoured to present to you Professor Furriela from FMU in Brazil. Amongst many other things, he's currently the Director of International Cooperation at FMU University. He's also Director of the International Relations School and heads up the... You're a Master of International Law, and that's awarded by the American University. And you're also President of the Refugees Commission of the Brazilian Bar Association. And again, UEL has a long association with refugee studies. We're one of the first master's programs in the UK, actually, to have something around refugee studies. So there's another connection there as well. Fascinating topic for today. Of course, Brazil is now in an envious position in world terms, I think, in terms of its economy. Today, quite fittingly, I think the Professor's going to talk not just about Brazil, but also the effects of the international crisis here. So, a very timely topic, and I'm sure you'll join me in the customary fashion in order to welcome Professor.
Thank you very much, Professor, for this presentation, and thank you very much for you to come here. I know that some of you are preparing final papers, theses, studying for tests, and so on. I know I have received some information related to that. As you know, I'm Brazilian, and sorry for my accent, and I'm not a native speaker. I learned the English, and it's as my second language, and if you can understand me, it's going to be perfect. And during my lecture, not just after that, you can make questions. Not just after also after the lecture, but during the lecture, you can make questions. It's going to make more interesting. Any kind of questions related to Brazil, if I can reply, it's going to be really fine. So if you want some information, some data, to see what's going on in Brazil, we are going to talk basically about the crisis in Brazil. We have some effects of the crisis in Brazil, and some effects are good. That's something incredible that I'm going to give you some information related to the crisis. The crisis in Brazil could open opportunities for us. That's something that is amazing. When we talk about the crisis, international crisis, basically I'm talking about the financial crisis and the economic crisis. The United States and the Europe and developed world is facing that crisis, and so I'm going to concentrate in some economic and financial points, perspectives about Brazil. And it's going to be interesting also for you to receive some information related to our country. I know that few of you or none of you are from Brazil, so it's going to be interesting for me to give some information about us. And as I said, make questions, feel free to do that. I brought here some my presentation, just some topics to guide my lecture and also to guide your, for you to follow my presentation. That's, Professor gave some information about me, related about some questions related to refugees' rights in Brazil. Now I'm working on that. I'm the president of that commission, the Bar Association Commission in Brazil. And at the FMU, at our institution, we have an important agreement. We have signed an agreement with the United Nations in order to help those refugees that arrive in Brazil. That's something quite new and quite important that I have to show you. And all of my background, almost all of them, are related to the United States. And I work in an international organization, Inter-American Development Bank. It's the World Bank for the Americas. It's an international organization like some others, like the United Nations. Okay, some information about Brazil. This is our location. We are in the South America. We are located close to the Tropic of Capricorn, as you can see. So usually, or in general, we are a very hot country. That's why I have a cold here, I think. That was too cold for me. Not yesterday. Yesterday the sun was shining, was really better for my body, but the day before yesterday was terrible. And I tried to visit some interesting points in London. You know, I could not stay in the hotel, you know, in this very nice city. I had to visit some place here outside, so now I'm just a little bit sick, okay? Don't be concerned about me. But for Brazilians, that kind of weather, we can find only in the south, you know, that's our European part. Like 10% of Brazil has this weather during the winter. This is the strongest winter ever for São Paulo would be the day that we had the day before yesterday. Today is a little bit hotter, at least that's what I feel. But usually it's a hot country, as you can see. It's a very large country. Almost all the countries in South America are our neighbors, as you can see, except Chile and Ecuador. So we have a lot of neighbors. They are completely different than us. They speak a different language. Usually they are Spanish speakers. You can find some others on the north that speak other languages, but like French, for example, but usually they are Spanish speakers. Brazil is a Portuguese speaker country. We have a different kind of heritage. We were a Portuguese colony, and they were Spanish colonies. They are quite different than us, also from that perspective. As you can see, Brazil is the only country that speaks Portuguese in Latin America, not only South America, and there is a reason for that. The colonization process was different. And also I'm going to give you some other information that's going to explain that. And in order to understand a little bit Brazil, you have to receive some information related to our background. Otherwise, you are going to get confused. You are going to think that we are the same as the other countries in South America. We are not the same in a bad and good way. Not saying that we are better. That's not my point here. But we are different. And that's what matters here. And because of our colonization process, we could stay only one country. We could remain together. That was difficult for Brazil. We had some problems, some local revolutions, but we are a country that remains together. We don't split like the others in South America. That's why one of the reasons why Brazil is the only country that speaks Portuguese in South America. Our population, almost 200 million, is quite a lot. We are going to complete that number in 2 or 3 years. Size, we are among the biggest countries in the world, as you could see there, and almost 50% of South America. It's quite a lot. Our government, we have a democracy in Brazil, stable, it's important for you to know, and it's a presidential republic. Our language, as I said, is Portuguese. And another important thing for you to know, in whole country we speak the same language. In some countries, large like Brazil, you have different languages in the country. In Brazil, we have absolutely the same language in whole country. We have some Indians, and they speak, unfortunately, I have to say some, we have few Indians. Almost all of them died during the colonization process. We have about 400,000 Indians in Brazil, and they speak their local language, also dialects, but Portuguese, also they speak Portuguese in general. Another thing interesting about the composition of our population, about our Indians, that is something strange for Europeans, but there are some Indians in Brazil that live isolated. They don't even know that the white people live in country. They live in the jungle. There are just few. We have 7 tribals. The government knows that they are living there in the jungle, but some of them don't even know that we exist. That's something quite interesting for you. They live in the north of Brazil, on the Amazon, close to Venezuela, Colombia, and so on. And they live by themselves, and the government controls them in order to protect them, actually, but they don't have contact with us. Some years ago, I received in my email a very interesting picture. A helicopter from the government was approaching by the Indians, and the Indians trying to fight with the helicopter. For them, the helicopter was something that they didn't know. Then you can see how complex is the Indian question in Brazil, and some interesting information. But basically, we are a country that speaks absolutely the same language. Our GDP is the 60th position in the world. It's a very important position. Even during the crisis, the Brazilian crisis, we had our own crisis during the 80s. Even during that time, we were among the 10 economies in the world. So we have a very good position from that point of view. But I'm going to give you some other information that this information is going to show you other perspectives about Brazil. This one is a good perspective. Overview about the Brazilian history. Just a sort of overview. Brazil was discovered by Portugal. I don't like that expression, discovered. We had Indians in Brazil before the Europeans, so somebody had discovered before, as you could imagine. So Brazil was conquered by Portuguese. And the year was 1500. That was the year in which we received the first Portuguese in Brazil. And on 1822, Brazil was independent from Portugal, and this is something quite interesting and quite unique about Brazil. If we talk about it and we compare Brazil among other countries in South America, we had a king in Brazil, Dom Peter I, and also another one, Dom Peter II, after the independence. That was not a Portuguese king, it was a Brazilian one. The first one was born in Portugal, but was king of Brazil, not for Portugal, after independence. It helped a lot to keep Brazil united. The monarchy system was important for that point of view also, to keep Brazil as a big country, as a country that could remain united even after independence, even after the end of monarchy. We had two kings. And Brazil decided to be a republic, and is still a republic. Between 1964 and 1985, it's important also for you to know, we had in Brazil a military dictatorship. And the military dictatorship in Brazil was different also if you compare to the others in South America. We had the dictatorship in Argentina, in Chile, Uruguay. That was a system that you could find in a lot of countries in Latin America. We didn't have a stable democracy. That's why the military decided to take the power. And because of some crisis that we had during the 60s, economical crisis, then the military decided to take the power. But there's something different in Brazil. Our dictatorship was different. Each 6 or 5 years, depends on the period, we had a different president, military president, that was a general. But what is different, if we talk about Brazil, is that they were elected by the Congress. So you could not find in Brazil one dictatorship like in Chile, you know Pinochet, very famous, that was the same dictator during that period. In Brazil, in 5 or 6 years, we had different dictators, but they were elected by the Congress, and the people were allowed to vote on the deputies and senators. So we could vote indirectly to the president. So it's quite unique in the world, and it's unique in South America, different. And that was on the Constitution. And we could vote for the president, but it was indirectly. We could vote for the parliament, and the parliament decided who was the president. And of course, they were afraid. They used to elect a military to be the president. But it's over. And just after the end of that dictatorship, we had the first president, that was President Collor. President Collor was directly elected, but he had a problem. He had an impeachment process. So what happened? Because of corruption problems, the parliament decided that he could not be in charge, he could not continue in charge of the country. So he suffered a process of impeachment, as we call in Brazil, and he was out of the power, and then we had the vice president. During that period, Brazil was in a very difficult situation. Can you imagine, just after a dictatorship, to elect a president that was not stable? Was a problem for Brazil. So we have the vice president, and the vice president was in charge for a short period of time, was an important vice president. He was president for just a short period, and then we could elect Fernando Henrique Cardoso. Fernando Henrique Cardoso was a success of government, very, very good government. He was elected in 1995. From that period to nowadays, we are a stable country. In anything that you can talk, we are economically stable, financially stable, politically stable. That's something recent for Brazil. I was explaining or talking about our past just for you to have an idea, because some people think that that process was quite old. No, it's a recent process. Then we have President Fernando Henrique Cardoso twice. He was re-elected. Very good president, very intelligent professor. He was a professor, still a professor. During his government, we could stabilize our economy. We had really high levels of inflation before his government. So after that, you know President Lula. He was elected just after Fernando Henrique Cardoso. They belong to different parties. President Fernando Henrique belongs to the center, and President Lula is leftist. So they are quite different in some aspects. President Lula was also a success. I'm going to talk about good, bad things also about him, but in general was a success, and he was re-elected. Now we have President Dilma, and she was elected last year, and actually 2 years ago, but was in charge since last year. And now she has a lot of problems related to our Congress. Our Congress is really complicated. Our parliament is really complicated. For a president to govern Brazil, it's necessary, as you know, to approve a lot of projects in the parliament. But our parliament is complex. We have a lot of different parties. We don't have 2 or 3. We have 15 different parties. So how can you manage your basis of government with this complexity? So what President Dilma had to do? She had to offer ministries for those politicians, for those parts, in order to compose her government. But it's really difficult. She had problems with 7 different ministers since she was in power. I'm talking about last year. They had to change 7 different ministers during that period. So it's a crisis for the government. The composition of our population, it's in Portuguese, but you can find here is white people. It's Brazilian African descendants here, from people from Asia here 1%, and Indians less than 1%. And here we have what's important in Brazil for your perception. We call pardos, we call mulattoes, those that are between white and black people. That's the composition of Brazil. So you can find all the ethnic groups and all the races in Brazil, what is really good for our culture. I think it's really important for Brazil to have these compositions. Important for our development, and it's important because we can be more integrated. It's really, really important for you to know about Brazil. And from the perspective of Brazilians, I'm going to talk about just a little bit about the international crisis. What is our point of view about the crisis? You have your own point of view. You are in Europe, you belong to the European Union, but we have our point of view about the international crisis. From the past, usually the crisis used to be in the developing countries, yes? Brazil was responsible for several crises, yes? During the 80s and several decades, but nowadays we are not responsible for that crisis. That's something that's quite interesting. And the government and the president in her speeches, she complains a lot about developed countries, you know. She says that they are guilty for our problems, even in Brazil, yeah. That's something quite unique, the different speech, yeah. But what is our perspective? Why do we think that the crisis belongs to developed countries, and what does we discuss in Brazil? What do we discuss in Brazil? The Brazilian perception of the international economic crisis. The China effect. In this picture, you can see President Nixon, and in his first visit to China. During this visit, I think something important was decided. That was an approach between the United States and China, but from now on, we started to transfer the industrialization process to China. A lot of important industries decided to move their facilities, their process of production from the United States, from Europe to China. And also Brazil suffered a little bit during this process, but that was really relevant for developed countries. And I think that this visit was important because the United States decided to invest more in China, and China decided that it was important to receive some investments in some areas in China in order to receive industries, basically. That was their idea. But from our perspective, from the perspective of what we study in Brazil, the crisis started here. The China effect, its industrialization and the exchange rate of its currency. That's a main problem also for Brazilians. The exchange rate of the Chinese currency. They can export really cheap products, and Brazil receives, as Europe and the United States and so on, a lot of products from China for a really good price. And the exchange rate is also responsible for that. So, from our perspective, the competition with China is, I would say, unfair. It's a very strong word to use here, but from our perspective, it's unfair. So, industry is moving their facilities to China. In other words, Europe and the United States losing industries. Also, the exchange rate of the Chinese currency. It's not good for the competition for Brazil, and also for other countries. Can you understand what I mean? The Brazilian perspective of the international crisis, we are going to continue to talk about this. The public debts of the developed countries. You know that's a very big problem in general. This is a problem in Greece, for example, in Spain, Italy, Portugal, and those countries that are really in trouble here in Europe, you know that. And that problem, from our perspective, is a problem of management of the financial situation. Usually, Brazil used to be wrong on that. We used to have a lot of problems managing our financial system. Nowadays, we go out, we travel to other countries in order to show how we do that. It's something that's quite different for Brazilians. And the North American banking and mortgage concerns. You know, this is one of the causes, or those causes of the American crisis. And also what we study in Brazil related to the crisis. especially in Europe. It's going to be difficult for Europe to keep the welfare state because of the public debts and so on. So those are some words related to what we think about the crisis. I'm not saying that we are right. I'm giving you some perspectives. Maybe I'm wrong here, but for you to see what do we think about the crisis. I think would be interesting for you. The Brazilian economical problems, the recent past and the present moment. The recent past, really recent past. We had high levels of inflation. I'm talking about 3,000% a year. I'm not talking about 100% a year, that's very high. 3,000. It's something that you cannot imagine. During that time, if you go to the supermarket in the morning, you had some price. If you go after lunch, other prices. Even during the same day, they used to change the price. And something that only in Brazil, I think, happened, you know. Everything was fine, you know, because everybody could follow that, you know. The middle class could invest on banks, so the bank could give you back the inflation, you know. You could invest on that. So you can, and you could invest from one day to another one, not from 1 month to another month. You could invest, go to the bank today, invest your salary or wage there, and if you decide to go to the supermarket next week, you could go there and get some money for your supermarket, and you could keep the value of your money. That's something only in Brazil, I think, happened, you know. But we tried to survive during that period of really high levels of inflation. Low level of economic growth. Brazil was not growing during that period. Used to grow really fast before the 80s. I'm talking about that period of the 80s, of that decade, and the beginning of the 90s. Because just after that, as I said, President Fernando Henrique Cardoso was elected, and he could control the inflation. That was something important for you to understand Brazil nowadays. And instability. And the government, during that period, tried to manage the crisis, tried to control the inflation. And the government was not able to do that. Non-effective measures. For example, packages, call packages. The government decided to invite all the ministers, call TV, you know, and talk on TV and showing a very interesting plan in order to control the inflation and in order to give back the growth to Brazil. The government was not able to do that. It was terrible. And tried to freeze the prices, tried to control the prices. In one of that packages, I would say, the government tried to stabilize the price, saying, what can you charge in your product? You know that it doesn't work. So the price of milk, if you go to a bakery, you could buy milk for a price. Then you ask for a milk for that price. Then you are going to hear that they don't have milk for you. No, we have no milk for you to sell today. But if you pay if you pay more, I give you milk. So, you know, on official data, official information, we could see that the prices were under control, inflation was under control, but it was not in fact. And deficit spending, so that was also a problem of Brazil. Inflation rates, just for you to see, so from 1990 to 1995. And you could see how Fernando Henrique Cardoso could control the inflation and how could President Lula control the inflation. It's something, for Brazilian standards, amazing. I'm not saying good things only about Fernando Henrique and Lula, but if you look from that perspective, it's something really good that you can say about Brazil. Inflation, or really high level of inflation, is not a big problem in Brazil anymore. We have to control the inflation, but not talking about that levels, you know. It's much, much, much lower nowadays. The present moment, inflation is under control. This year is going to be about 5%, or even a little bit higher than that, because the government is trying to control the inflation and at the same time is trying to help Brazil to grow faster. And it's something difficult for the central bank to manage, but we are trying to do that. Please.
Does Brazil have a welfare state?
No, it's not official that we have a welfare state, but in some ways we do. There are some good things about Brazil if we talk about the welfare state. For example, everybody has the right to receive a retirement. It's nothing, it's not nothing very high, but a minimum everybody is able to receive. I'm talking about, we are here, libras esterlinas, 200 pounds months. It's a minimum. A little bit more than that, 250. It's minimum. It's not a lot of money, but at least something for everybody. If you don't pay your retirement system, if you don't pay for that, even though you have the right to receive, it's something related to welfare state. Also, we have a public health system in Brazil. You are foreigners for our Paulo's perspective here. If you go to Brazil, if you need to go to a hospital, hospitals in general are not really good. The public system is not very good in Brazil, but they are going to take care of you. They are not going to ask you for nothing, only your ID in order to fill some forms, and that's it. We offer this to everybody in Brazil, a public health system. Also, what we have here that's there in Brazil, what's quite interesting is that the government offers for really poor families a minimum wage. The government gives that. It's very helpful for those families. Brazil is an equal country. It's a problem. We have a high level of concentration of income. So, if we talk about Brazilians in general they are poor. And some of them are really poor. So the government gives money to those people, and there are some rules for that. For example, they have to keep their children in the school in order to receive, the family to receive this minimum wage or minimum help from the government. So we have, in some ways, our welfare state. The government protects a lot of the population. It has a good effect if we talk about the crisis. Why it has a good effect? Those people that used to have a very low income, now they receive some help from the government. Now they are consumers. So if the international market is not that good for our products, we have 200 million consumers in Brazil. So our companies are doing not very good, they're not in a real good shape, but they are doing well because we have a local market. And we have a local market also because of those programs that the government decided to implement. So we have a welfare state in some ways. It's not as complex as what you have in England, for example, or what you have in general in Europe, but we have in some ways a welfare state. Is that what you want to know? The real case of study. Real is the name of our currency, and it was established during Fernando Henrique government, and also Lula's government, and we continue with this currency. And it's a quite interesting case to study, because we could change our currency, control the inflation, and also it helped for those that were really poor to receive some income. Why? The inflation was basically against really poor people. They received their wage, they had to spend that wage, they had no access to banks in order to invest their money, in order to protect themselves from the inflation effects. So, if we have very low levels of inflation, so for those people is something really good. Also for the distribution of income was really helpful. And some good things about Brazil. We could change the currency of whole country in 24 hours. It's something amazing If we talk about a country that's huge, and a country that has no roads connecting the whole country, no railways, no airports. In some areas of Brazil, you can reach some place only by helicopters. So we could change the currency of whole country in 24 hours. That's something that was amazing. You have euro in Europe, you know how difficult it is to manage a new currency. We could do this in Brazil, and it's working well. It's a success for Brazil. The present moment. Let's talk a little bit about economic growth in Brazil. I'm not an economist, I'm talking about Brazil in general and the crisis. But we need to talk a little bit about that because it's also interesting for you to understand Brazil. The Brazilian miracle. We had a miracle like Japan had and like Europe after the Second World War. During the 70s, basically, we were in the military rule, dictatorship, I told you, and you could grow like 14% 1 year. That was on 1973. And Brazil was growing really fast during the 70s. And the last year was less than 3%. Was good if we talk about the international problem, international crisis. If we compare to some countries in Europe or even the United States. But it's not good enough for a country that needs to grow faster in order to create jobs, in order to distribute income. We need to grow faster. So everybody says that in Brazil the situation is really good. I would say it's good, but not that good. We need to grow faster. This is one issue in Brazil. This year, maybe we're gonna grow 4%, a little bit better than last year. But even with that level of growth, Brazil now has a new middle class. I'm talking about those that were out of the consumer market because of the level of their income. Because of the stabilization of the economy, because of the end of the inflation, because of the programs that the government decided to establish in order to give a minimum income for the whole population of Brazil, and because of our growth, that's not that fast, but at least something, now we have a new middle class in Brazil. So, for Brazilian standards, if you earn like 500 pounds a month, you belong to the middle class. It's nothing if we talk about here, about England, but it's something important for Brazilians. If they earn that minimum, it means that they belong to the middle class. So they have access of some goods, and they are on the consumer market. Please.
Yeah, you say it hasn't grown greatly last year. I was looking at some of the statistics in the Economist about this, but you grew I think it was 500 million. Your I think your GDP was it 2,500 billion.
Yeah.
So you grew 500 billion. That's a massive growth.
Yeah.
Even at that. So relatively speaking, when you say you want to grow faster, how can you possibly, when you're still defining yourself, although you're the 6th largest economy, potentially about to become by 2030 the 4th biggest economy. I mean, how are you going to grow faster than 500 billion at this particular time? I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, but I'm talking about that because we were able to grow faster than that.
Yeah.
We were able to do that. And I'm going to give you some information about Brazil in this presentation. And you are going to see that we need a lot of reforms in Brazil. We are growing, and I'm not going to discuss that. But we are growing, we could say we are not so bad because of the rest of the world. In general, the rest of the world is not in a good situation. If we are in a better situation, it doesn't mean that we are really good. If you take some data, some information related to billions and billions of pounds or euros or dollars, it doesn't matter, you're going to see that we are doing really well. We have a new middle class. There are some Brazilian companies now that they are international companies. They have a business all over the world, but we still have problems.
Yeah. Presumably you see the new middle class as your markets develop. So rather, if your economy is growing, when you've got a big 194 million people, there's your market, surely.
Yes. Yes, but you need to grow more, because if I tell you that for Brazilian standards, if you earn 500 pounds a month, it's a middle class. It's not a middle class in our country. We spend in the hotel more than that here. Okay.
You can stay.
Yeah, I didn't. The university paid, but what is my point here is that the Brazilian miracle is not a miracle. You are in a better situation, but we are really far away to be in the first world or developed world. It doesn't matter what kind of expression you want to use, but what matters is we are far away from that. And if you go to São Paulo, to our city, the most developed city in Latin America, the city of São Paulo is richer than Denmark. The GDP of one city is higher than, but if you go to the north of Brazil, it's poorer than some countries in Africa. So some people go to do business in Brazil, they go to São Paulo, the business center, some of them go to Rio also, in Brazil and so on, but basically to São Paulo, you have a wrong impression. We are a huge country, and if you travel a little bit around our country, you are going to see that you have a lot to do. In some locations in Brazil, you don't have even a road to go there. You have to get a plan to go to a farm, and then somebody gets you there by trunk, then you take a boat and so on. You know, in 3 days you are, then you can reach your the place that you want to visit. There are a lot of things to do in Brazil, but there are good things. You talked about something that's really good. Our domestic product, it's very relevant. We are among the 10 economies in the world, in a world that has more than 200 countries. It's really important, but the concentration of income in Brazil is so high, that changes the miracle that you are seeing. Okay, please.
But as a, you have a surplus every year.
Yes.
You make a surplus.
Yes.
Even though the GDP is 4%, you only surplus every year over the last 10 years.
Yes. More than 10 years. In 15 years we have a surplus. But it was important for a country that had high levels of inflation, no confidence. Nobody was confident about Brazil. How can I do business in a country that has 3,000% inflation a year? You know, it's almost impossible. We could manage. I was there. I could survive. And in a good way, some things, you know, because we could manage that. We learned how to manage. But it was not the ideal world. The ideal world is to be rich, a rich country, but not with these really poor people. I'm talking about some people that don't have access to a good life, to a good standard of life. So I think this is the bad thing about the Brazilian Brazilian economic problem, concentration of income. Please.
What was the main reason for the currency change? Is it lower inflation?
You are talking about the concentration of income?
The currency, why did they change it?
Yes, we decided to change. The government prepared a very good package, as we say in Brazil, a good program to control the inflation. So the government decided that it was important to change the name of the currency in order to give confidence to the new one. The old currency, Cruzeiro, was not, we were not confident. So they changed the name of the currency, they changed the currency, the bills and so on, the coins and so on, everything, in 24 hours. And the process was really fast because the government was concerned about the contamination from the old currency. So we did this really fast, on purpose. And also the government tried to control financial problems, to solve banking problems. We had a lot of banking problems. A lot of banks in Brazil used to earn a lot during the inflation period. And after the end of the inflation, how could they survive? So the government decided to rescue those banks. So the process was really well done in Brazil. That's why it's a success.
So then could you say that you changed the currency in order to rebrand the currency in order to reiterate the benefits in the sense of to eradicate the idea that say, to basically enforce the confidence in the country.
Yes, yes, that's the idea. And also we had a lot of marketing. Now we have real. Real is the name of the course. Yeah, if you say in English, real, yeah, but real in Portuguese. We changed the name of the currency and we had a lot of marketing on that. Now we have a new currency. The new currency is really strong. And that was stronger than dollar, for example. Much stronger. Dollar, you could buy with real some cents of dollar. Something incredible, you know. But the idea was to demonstrate to the people that real was strong. So was a process. Now Brazil is not in a good shape because of this process was a success. That's why I can say good things about our former president, Fernando Henrique, and the President Lula, you know, because they could keep on that. For Brazil was really basic. Otherwise, can you imagine Brazil with high level of inflation during this year of international crisis? How could you manage a country with that problem? We can be good managers nowadays because we have a stronger currency. And it happens in your country. You have a real strong currency. We can see when we exchange reais to pounds and the prices here. It's really important for a country to have a strong currency. And for Brazil was something new. Questions? Please.
You've given us some statistics on the growth. What about the growth? I mean, what was the impact of that growth on the growth in the middle class? Could you give us some statistics?
I don't have the statistics, but I can give you a general idea, and I can send you. But now Brazil has about 200 million, as I told you. You know, the high-level class in Brazil is like 10 million. 10 million, high level. And
that's the upper class.
Yes.
And do you define upper class as earning how much?
It's like 30 million. We have 30 million people that now belong to the new middle class. 30 million. It's a lot of people. The same population of some countries in Europe. Almost the same population of Spain, for example. Now they belong to the new middle class. They were not. And everything is changing in Brazil in favor of them. I'm the director, as Professor said, of one private university in Brazil. So students pay for their tuition. We don't offer scholarships. Only the government does that. We have public universities in Brazil that don't charge students. We do. There are a lot of new students now in our university because now they can pay. They can pay tuition. They can study. Also, if you watch Brazilian programs, the television in Brazil is really strong, media in Brazil is really strong. And that was in favor of the dictatorship also. You can imagine that. It's really strong in Brazil. And if you watch some channels in Brazil, all the programs now are for them. Not for us anymore. We don't see sophisticated programs in TV. We see programs that are for them. Because now they are consumers. They are products for them. So Brazil changed a lot because of the new middle class. There are a lot of studies related to that. But the new middle class has, as I told you, about 30 million people. They were not on the Brazilian consumer market if we talk about 15 years ago. Now they are. Something that's really important. Is that what you want to know?
Yeah, I just wanted to get a sense of because there are a lot of documentaries, interesting documentaries about, for example, gated communities, and the level of poverty, high level of poverty, sort of in Brazil.
Yeah. And
I just wanted to get a sense, an appreciation of how this growth, how it is changing the landscape, of Brazil, in terms of
it's changing.
Yeah, people benefiting from the growth.
Yes. I don't like a lot President Lula. I don't not say something from my perspective because of corruption. You have no idea how was it. No idea. Okay? But I would like to say something really good about him. Now if you go to favelas are that houses, really poor houses that we have around the cities.
Yeah.
Yes, or something like that. If you go inside one of that poor house now, today you find a plasma TV. They have a cell phone. Sometimes they have better goods than I have in my house, okay? Sometimes I invite them because that's not possible, but they have computers, laptops. They don't want desktop anymore. They want laptops. They have Apple computers and so on. So it means that now they can buy. And the access of credit for them, I'm gonna talk about that, but it's something that's new for them. If we talk about 15 years ago, only the middle class, the real middle class, and the people that were in the real high level of our society were able to have credit for them to buy a car, a house, and so on. Credit in general. Poor people could not even have a bank account because they didn't have enough income to open an account, and the bank don't want those people as clients. They don't have income. Nowadays it's changed. Now they want those people as their clients. They are looking for poor people in Brazil banks nowadays. Very good clients. And this is the new market for them also. So those people now, giving the number, is that they are integrated to our market. The effects of the crisis in Brazil. One of the effects that we have that's dramatic in Brazil is the effect of the exchange rate of real, of our currency. It's a problem. Real is stronger than ever. So it's a problem for us to export. And now we can import much more because our currency is stronger. Stronger than ever, I would say. Exportation problems. Brazil has a surplus of the exportation because we export a lot of commodities. You know, soy and any kind of agricultural products that you can imagine. We export a lot, basically to China. They buy a lot of goods in Brazil, raw products and so on. But it's a problem in Brazil because our perspectives are not good for the exportation. We could not export industrialized products anymore. Brazil used to export airplanes from Embraer, for example. Now this is a problem for Embraer to export airplanes because of the exchange rate of our currency. And a few days ago, I was reading an article and I was really concerned about that. The article was about our past. It said that Brazil is back to its agricultural past. We tried hard to be an industrialized country. Now the agricultural products are much more important than industrialized products in Brazil. So now we are back to the agricultural world. For us, it's a concern. The agribusiness in Brazil grows really fast, really fast. It's important for the development of the countryside of Brazil, for those cities that are close to the farms and so on. But for the industrialized world, I would say, in Brazil, it's a problem. They are facing a competition with Chinese products, and they are facing problems to export because of our exchange rate. The effects on the industries. The recent measures of the Brazilian government. The Brazilian government is really concerned about the problems of the Brazilian industry. The agribusiness goes really well, but the industries are facing problems, as I told you. And the Brazilian government tried to help the industries. And we received a lot of important measures from the Brazilian government in order to help the industries. And this problem is related to the crisis also. The government decided to change a little bit our taxation system in Brazil. Taxes in Brazil are really high. You asked me about the welfare state. We tax our population and our means of production like the Sweden does. But we don't offer the same public services as Sweden does. So it's heavy for us. For companies to do business in Brazil is also a problem. In order to understand our taxation system that is so complex, even us, we don't understand sometimes what is going on there. And high percentages of taxes in Brazil. But the government tried to change that, and they helped the industries reducing taxes in Brazil and offering public credit for a very good interest rate. The government decided to reduce the interest rate in Brazil. I'm going to show you how they did that. The good effect of the crisis in Brazil. In general, in Brazil, what we have? Really high levels of interest for everybody. If you want to buy a house in Brazil, if you want to sign a mortgage agreement in Brazil, a contract in Brazil, you have to pay like 12% of interest rates in Brazil for 30 years. I'm talking about each year, 12% per year. It's a lot, it's really high, plus the inflation rates. So, this year if you have a mortgage, you would pay 70%, because it's the inflation plus the interest rate. So it's really, really high. And the central bank, the Federal Reserve, as we say in the United States or in some other countries, the central bank decided to change that, and now we have the lowest level in the Brazilian recent history, 90% a year is the interest rate that the central bank decided to establish for the public bonds that we have in Brazil. So it's much lower than the 26% that we used to have a few years ago. So it's better. And why the government, or does the government can do this right now? Because of the international crisis. We have to face the crisis. In order to face the crisis, we have to change the interest rates in Brazil. It's much lower than it was a few years ago because of the international crisis. Now we can have a good effect in Brazil. The effect is we can have much lower interest rates in Brazil than ever. And it's still really high, among the highest interest rates in the world, even after that reduction. And the Brazilian government tried also to reduce the interest rates. If we talk about nowadays life, if you, for example, go to a bank in order to borrow some money for you to change your car or to buy a house or so on, what did the Brazilian government decided to do? The Brazilian government controls some banks. We call public banks. They are under the government control. We have Banco do Brasil, we have Caixa Econômica Federal, we have several public banks, and they are really big. The government decided to use those banks to force or to compete with the private banks in order to get the new clients. In order to get the new clients, the public banks decided to reduce interest rates. And the private banks, in order to compete with them, they are doing the same. So the government is using the central bank plus the public banks in order to force the reduction. And it's possible in Brazil because of the international crisis. Otherwise, we would have much higher levels of interest rates as we used to have. And why? Why? The problem is Brazil needs to reform its system. The very complex taxation system of Brazil. We cannot attract international investments. We cannot grow faster as we were talking here. We cannot encompass more people in our new middle class if we don't change the complexity of our taxation system. I'm talking about almost 100 different taxes. It's almost impossible. Sometimes you are not paying a tax because you don't know that that tax even exists. How can you imagine? How can you manage a company with a country like this? The problem is the Brazilian government is concerned about losing some income, you know. That's why they created that complex system, you know, in order to collect more and more and more taxes in Brazil. But it's a problem for those that want to have business in Brazil, and also for Brazilian companies. It's very complex to understand. We could solve our inflation problems, we could solve a lot of economic problems, but we need to reform our taxation system. But it's not possible nowadays because the federal government is facing problems in the Congress. And in order to reform our taxation system, you need to prepare bills or projects and send to the Congress. And they need to approve. You know, and it's going to be very difficult to approve projects nowadays. Yes, sir?
To what extent is that a fact related to the fact that President Dilma Rousseff was very much seen as sponsored by President Lula?
Yeah.
Seen as a bit of a political outsider, even within her own party. Would it be different with a different president, do you think, or is it just because that's just how you said you've got 15 political parties?
Yeah.
You've got somebody who's seen as a political outsider who was sponsored by the previous president in charge.
Yeah, the President Dilma was sponsored by President Lula. They belong to the same party, but the situation is a little bit more complex. President Lula was more able to negotiate. As I said, I don't like him a lot because of corruption. You have no idea. I'm saying that you have no idea because you have no idea what happened. But relate to him, relate to his family, relate to his government. Yeah, you know, everybody was taking advantage of the Brazilian government in a really bad way. But he was a very good negotiator. You know, he was a president of a labor union. You know, so he was a person that knows how to negotiate. He used to negotiate representing workers, negotiating with companies. So during his government, he had the same ability. That's an advantage that he has. But she doesn't have. She's an economist, President Dilma. She's very smart, but she has few experience negotiating. She was not that typical politician as Lula was, as Fernando Henrique was. She has not a career related to that. So she's facing problems negotiating with our parliament. If she faces that problems, she cannot manage deeper reforms. She can do just some reforms as I told you, no? She can ask the Brazilian government banks to compete with private banks. She's able to do that. She's doing that. But if we talk about a very deep reform in our taxation system, for example, she cannot approve that. She's not able to approve that. And what is complex also in Brazil is that we have more than 40 ministers. And they try to give one minister for one party, 2 ministers for another party that's more important, and so on. I'm talking about 15 parties. How can you manage that? Losing ministers each month because of corruption. Each month we have a new case of corruption related to a minister. Then in a couple of days he loses his position, they call somebody else for the same position. So how can she manage reforms in an atmosphere like this? Also, we have problems on the social security system of Brazil. It's an advantage for Brazilians to have a public retirement program, as I told you, because everybody has the right to receive, you know, a minimal amount. But it's a problem for the government to support that. The system doesn't collect enough funds in order to pay. We are a young country in general, but we have a lot of old people, retired people also on the other side. And we have to pay the retirement for all of them. So the system is in debt. And it's a reform is really necessary. And we have a very old labor law system and the laws. Our laws, labor laws, are from the 40s. I'm talking about the period of the Second World War. We have the same laws. I'm not saying that those laws are really bad, but they are not updated. The world is different. The world needs changes on that also. Those laws are really, really old, you know. For you to decide an agreement between a labor union and a company, it's necessary to go before the judge. They cannot negotiate among them. Even if we talk about very strong labor unions, they have the same power sometimes as companies, but they cannot negotiate directly with each other. Almost every labor law case has to go to the court. In Brazil, we have more than 1 million new cases each year, labor law new cases going to the court. Everything has to go to the court. If you work in a place and the company needs to pay something for you, you have to go to the court in order to obligate the company to pay you. You know, it's not modern, it's not even necessary if we talk about industrialized cities and so on. So we need to update our labor laws. Otherwise, companies don't want to do business in Brazil. I'm also a lawyer in Brazil. I represent some American companies and European companies, two or three from your country, from here. And they are afraid to invest more in Brazil because of their labor laws. And it's not in favor of the employees sometimes. Why? If you work in Brazil and you receive, for example, 1,000 pounds a month is your wage, for example, the company has to pay 2,000. One pay 1,000 for you, the other 1,000 for the government. So you receive 50% of your salary, actually, and the rest goes to the government. That is not efficient, as I told you, and the company has to expend the double, and you receive 50%. So it's not in favor even employees. Those laws are not updated. And the Lula's and Dilma's government, they were afraid of the private sector in Brazil, even in public services. As you know, we are going to have the Olympic Games in Brazil and also the World Cup. We need to invest a lot in airports. If you go to our airports, you are not going to believe, you know, they're old style. If you want to go to museums, please visit us, okay? If you go to the airport of São Paulo, you're going to see the architecture from the 80s. It's quite nice, you know, but they don't have enough space for millions and millions of passengers each year. So what they decided to do, to use other airports close to São Paulo. So you need to travel to the countryside in order to get a plane to come here, because they need to use all the airports in the country, you know, in order to help us. And all of them, or almost all of them, are public airports. So the private investors are necessary to update. I'm not saying that I'm here only to talk about or in favor of the private sector. I think that we have to be partner of the private sector in order to update our infrastructure. We are really afraid about our airports, for example, to receive tourists, a lot of millions of tourists during this, the Olympic Games and the World Cup. But now the government decided to open to the private sector, but we don't have enough time to prepare our airports for the Olympic Games because it's too late. And the government is afraid of that, always afraid of the participation of the private sector in Brazil. This is also one problem that we have in Brazil. Some perspectives. Brazil is still the country of opportunities, We have a lot of infrastructure projects, and we need international investors in Brazil. They are really necessary. The government's not able anymore to invest enough resources on that. And the government's trying to do that. Even the Lula's government, they prepared a plan for development of the infrastructure in Brazil, and they did a lot of good projects, but not enough for a country that's bigger than Europe, for example. We need new roads, we need new schools, we need the airports, and so on. So infrastructure projects are really attractive for international investors. And they are needed in whole country. They are necessary in whole country. If you go to São Paulo, the traffic is horrible because we need more metro. The metro system needs to be expanded. we have projects like this in our country. So also those projects are new perspectives, they are opportunities. The Brazilian market is growing. We have the new middle class. It's not growing as fast as it was, but still growing. So if you have a local market growing like this, we can attract more or be more attractive. Also, we have the World Cup and the Olympic Games. We are going to need new hotels, new investments. Oil field projects. I don't know if you have this information, but we are collecting oil from the seashore, as your country do. England does the same here. And we are getting oil from the seashore very deep. And we could find very big fields close to our seashore. So there are a lot of opportunities for those that want to invest on the oil industry, on petroleum and so on, gas and related areas. And we have changed some of our regulation for international investments. That's something that is important to say about Brazil. I decided to talk about good and bad things here, but this is something good about Brazil. If a company decides to invest in Brazil, it's guaranteed that the contract is going to be respected. Some days ago, we received some news related to the Spanish oil company in Argentina. The government decided to take control of the company. It's not going to happen in Brazil. It didn't happen in Brazil. We talked about military rule. It didn't happen during that time. We talked about the government of color. We talked about Fernando Henrique, Lula, and Dilma. But we have a tradition in Brazil. We respect agreements. We respect the contracts. That's something that's almost unique in Latin America. If you take a look in some countries in Latin America, you are going to be afraid. And I'm going to say that, sorry to say that, I have friends there, I worked in a bank that used to invest in Latin America, but we are afraid about contracts. They don't respect contracts even with Brazilians. We have a lot of investments, for example, in Bolivia, and we have signed a lot of agreements there. They don't respect the agreements that they have signed with us. We signed agreements with Ecuador in order to build a power plant there. Brazilian construction companies are there working, they are not receiving. The government decided that they are not going to pay Brazilian companies. So we have problems there. But in Brazil, you have some, it's safe from this perspective to invest in Brazil. I'm open for questions. This is my email address. Please feel free to email me and feel free to make questions that you think that are going to be interesting for you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. We have run for a long time, and that has been great because you've been able to ask questions along the way. John, can I ask you to chair, because there'll be other questions and I have to go now.
Okay, no problem.
You can ask chair. That's okay.
Okay, so John will chair and pick up any other questions, but thanks once again.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, questions? Any questions?
Right, Cynthia.
Okay.
It was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much for providing us with the opportunity to learn a bit about Brazil. I'm actually quite interested in the opportunity presented for Brazilian people with regard to hosting the World Cup and the Olympic Games in 2040 and 2016 respectively. I just want to be interested in your opinion or your understanding about how Brazilian people think about the two mega events and what their attitudes towards volunteering, providing volunteering service for the events.
Yeah, the government decided to wake up very late for that, especially if we talk about the infrastructure. I was talking about the airports, I'm not lying, They are effective because we are organized. Brazil is organized in some ways. but they are not enough if you are going to talk about millions, that we are going to receive millions of people. Now they decided to open to the private sector. I'm not saying that I'm in favor of the private sector. You know, I'm giving you information. A partner with the private sector was necessary because the public sector didn't have enough funds to allocate for airports. I'm talking about $20 billion in order to renovate airports. It's a lot of money, and the government needs to invest on other things. But now we decided to wake up. So the government decided to organize very good projects for that, to invest on that. I'm talking especially about the federal government that has a lot of cash, and also about the opening for the private sector, and also in other sectors. So now we decided to wake up. I'm afraid that is late. That's what I'm afraid. They invited also the army to try to help to renovate the airports as fast as they could. The army is working in order to renovate the airports and the infrastructure in general in order to prepare everything. So I think from this year to the next year, we are going to have a lot of opportunities for that. The government and the federal government as the local government, we are a federation, we have states. The states and also the cities, they decided to invest on that. And I could see that international hotel companies are investing in hotels in Brazil. And we decided to build a new stadium in São Paulo for the World Cup. We have a lot of stadiums. I don't know why a new one, but that's what they decided to have. But it's going to be red for the World Cup. So the involvement started this year. So for those that are looking for opportunities, I think that we're going to find, especially this year, in the year that we decide to wake up. About the involvement of the population. The Olympics are going to be in Rio de Janeiro. Rio de Janeiro has a tradition related to games in general, because we had the American Games in Brazil, we call Pan America. It's like the Olympic Games for the Americas, including the United States and Canada. And that was well organized. And they have some facilities, still some facilities there. So it's, I think that they're going to manage that. I'm concerned in Rio about the safety, because we still have a lot of violence there. But the government now tried to face the problem. You could see maybe on TV here, all over the world, police going to favelas, trying to arrest criminals and try to put more officers around those favelas. So this is a program in order to prepare Rio to receive foreigners. So we are looking for that and seeing that they are doing a lot of things. They are investing on equipments also. 2 days or 3 days ago, I called my friend Paulo, he's a judge in São Paulo, because an American company is looking for the police in Brazil in order to train the police. Because we have no terrorism in Brazil. It's good that we have no terrorists in Brazil, but with the Olympic Games and the World Cup, we have to be prepared for that. We have regular violence in Brazil, you know. Somebody steal your car and so on, you know. Some people have guns and, you know, that kind of traditional violence, but not terrorism. Our police is not prepared for that. Now they are concerned about that. They are preparing the police for that. Because we don't have this in Brazil, but we are going to receive foreigner delegations, yes? So we have to be prepared for that. And the population started to be involved in that. The feeling of the games, the feeling is gonna begin this year, I think. We didn't realize that we are gonna have those really important events in Brazil, but I think that from this year we are gonna feel that. And the World Cup we can feel in São Paulo because we are gonna have 6 games in São Paulo. Yeah, we are going to have games in several cities in Brazil, including São Paulo. That's why we are building a new stadium. And the government decided to build the new stadium in the poorest neighborhood of São Paulo, in order to develop that area. So we can find the interesting programs that started this year.
Okay, I think we've got time for just one more question, perhaps, because time is getting Kazim.
I'm just going back to...
Any kind of question.
I'm just going back to what John highlighted in terms of growth. I'm not sure how familiar you are by the Rome Club, the study of Rome Club on growth. Basically, what this study reveals that, within the dynamics of growth, as you try to grow more and more, a lot of negative feedback is generated, which means there is a limit to growth. Now, going back to what John highlighted, earlier on, I would have thought the kind of growth you're looking for has to come with substantial increase in the middle class population. This is say from 30 to 60, and a considerable level of export. Given all the constraints that you highlighted, and there is a limit to increase the middle class population, how are you going to achieve the kind of growth that you are? Is it just an aspiration, or do you think it is possible? In other words, are you questioning the study of Rome Club?
It's the government says that you want to grow faster in higher levels, but we have some problems related to that. In years that we grow faster, we export less. That's something that happens in Brazil. It's traditional in Brazil. So we lose international markets sometimes because we have a large population. We can consume more, internal consumers. Also, the real problem, the most important problem that we have there is that as faster as we grow, as more problems as we have with inflation in Brazil. To control inflation in Brazil, we have also to control the consumer market. When the consumers buy more and more and more, we have problems in order to control the prices. And how can we balance that? From our analysis, not from only my analysis, but in general in Brazil, reforms are necessary. The political and economic system in Brazil could offer this to Brazil. We can grow 3% a year, 4% a year without reforms. If we reform our system in general, as I told you, the taxation system, the labor laws, and so on, and they also if you can attract more investments to the infrastructure, we can grow faster, and we can control the inflation at the same time. So the model has to be reformed. And the one thing that's important, also to talk about growth in Brazil, I told you that during the 70s, Brazil could grow really fast. But that was the worst period for concentration of income in Brazil. We were growing, we are offering more income for those that were already rich. Can you understand me? But not for those that are really poor. So what else we have to do? If you want to grow faster, we have also to combine distribution of income. I'm not saying something that is communist here. I'm telling you something that's necessary. If you have only 10 million people that have a good life in a country that has 200 million, you have to be afraid about what is going on there. If you say that we have a middle class that has people that receive 500 pounds a month, you can see that is really a middle class, or it is something that's better.
Perhaps that explains why your president says that she wants to strive to raise wages in line with productivity.
Yes, yes. And the government is really concerned about that. Brazil needs to grow more in order to offer better opportunities for the students, in order to offer better jobs. Well, our level of unemployment is not that high. It's like 7%. But we include jobs that are not good. If a person has or working something, you know, sometimes not a good job, it means that that person has a job and there is no unemployment. So what I would say that we have to offer better opportunities. And the government is concerned about the growth because the growth can help on that. It's not the only tool for that. It's one of them. Of course, we need to combine other projects. We need to change other things. But if you grow faster, for sure we can have one of the tools to help to solve our social problems, not the only one.
Have you got one more question at the back?
My question actually follows on from what you said, and there seems to be an assumption that by achieving better economic growth will have some trickle-down effect to alleviate social problems. And I'm thinking particularly about the favelas, where I've been doing research for the last 4 years in one of them. And I just wonder what evidence you have for that's actually working. Because where I'm working, the violence, the organised crime, the drug running is just as bad as ever. People may have plasma TVs, but that's not because they've gone through the legal market.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of the very poor families can't claim the money that you were talking about because there aren't places for their children to be in schools. So the project I'm evaluating is trying to offer education places. So to me, from my perspective, doing research in favela, it seems to be a bit messy.
Yeah, no, you are right. From also my perspective, the economic growth is one of the tools, as I said. It's not enough to solve all the problems, but we need to create opportunities for those people, to create jobs for those people, to create opportunities for them to work. Those that live in favelas, we have a different situation. I would like to explain to you between Rio and São Paulo, the big cities in Brazil, in which we have favelas. In general, those that live in favelas in São Paulo, they work, they have jobs. They don't earn enough money to have a better house. That's the point. They receive salaries that are not good. In Rio, it's more complex, Rio de Janeiro. We have a lot of crime related to that, and sometimes they have good stuff in their house because they didn't buy that stuff, you know. They could get in a legal way, you know. I know exactly what you mean, you are completely right. The economic growth, or if you grow faster, I'm not telling you that we can solve all the problems. During the 70s, as I told you, we could grow 14% in 1 year. It's faster than China nowadays. Not even China could grow as fast as 14% a year. And that was a very bad year for our favelas. Why? We could grow in big cities. We started to attract people from the countryside. Do you understand what I mean? To live in big cities. As soon as they didn't have good opportunities to work in good jobs, they had to live in very bad situation. So it didn't solve the problem. I understand and I agree absolutely with you and with Professor that the economic growth doesn't solve all the problems and it creates other problems. But from the government perspective and some perspectives, it's important to combine distribution of income, to invest on education. It's really necessary to do this in Brazil. We are not updated on that. And to combine several factors, social factors, in order to help those families to have a better situation. And the economic growth could be, I'm not saying that's absolutely right, one important tool for the creation of opportunities for people to work if you try to manage the economic growth in a proper way. That's what I mean.
I think we have to leave it there, I'm afraid. I just think we should just say thank you once more to Professor Furriela, and we wish you a safe trip.
Okay. And those that want to talk with me a little bit here, I'm available even for the professors. If I was not enough, that was my answer was not enough, and if I have to be clear. Okay. Thank you very much.